Trump's bizarre Gaza takeover video has sparked everything from backlash and applause to weird looks and even accusations of homoerotic wokeism. Measles is back in the United States and it just killed a kid in Texas, but don't worry, RFK Jr. says he's on the case. What the hell is and isn't actually in the Trump spending bill that just passed? And we finish out today's show with a positive news story for the first time in weeks. We're talking about all that and much more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news, how it's being covered, and how people are reacting to it, starting with this. Have you ever found yourself daydreaming of a vacation filled with gold statues of Trump, Elon Musk eating hummus, and propaganda music? Because if so, oh boy, does the President of the United States have an AI video for you. Because last night, Trump posted a video, seemingly of his vision for Gaza depicting children running out of rubble and into a palm tree-lined resort town, all while this song is playing.
No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
And if that felt a little bit like sensory overload, it would be hard to blame you. Right? And people have highlighted some of the stranger moments there, like Elon Musk and children dancing in money, bearded belly dancers on the beach, a Trump Gaza tower, shirtless Trump sipping poolside brewskis with Netanyahu, and a massive Trump statue and kid carrying a golden Trump balloon. Like, it's kind of a Mickey Mouse and Disneyland situation. And while some were shocked and disturbed, you had others saying, it's not too surprising because Trump has expressed interest in taking Gaza and turning it into what he called the Riviera of the Middle East, right, with him previously proposing that the United States would take over the Gaza Strip, a move that would displace the 2 million Palestinians living in the currently war-torn area, though his administration later suggested this would only be temporary. Though obviously, he faced a ton of backlash for suggesting that, with a UN spokesperson, for example, saying that any forced displacement of people is tantamount to ethnic cleansing. Though hopping back to the video, it ended up getting a fair share of heat, though tons of people were mocking it, right? Some noting the gender fluidity of the bearded belly dancers and saying that Trump Gaza actually looks woke, with others writing, "Make Gaza great again," with an AI-generated video we didn't watch super carefully before we posted it. But this also, as you had some just genuinely appalled that the President of the United States posted this clip to his social media platforms, with folks saying things like the Trump Gaza video is quite possibly the most disgusting, the most shameful, the most hideous public communication by a US president in living memory, saying it's not just a moral failure, it's a deliberate, calculated display of cruelty. As well as Trump sees Gaza not as a home to millions of human beings, but as an empty plot of land for his next branding project. The lives of Palestinians mean nothing to him. They are simply an obstacle to be bulldozed over for casinos, golf courses, and beachfront resorts. Sick person. And while of course, with this, there were some that loved the Trump video, right? Seeing it as Trump just doing some epic trolling, there were also some Trump supporters who were condemning it as well. Or with seeing comments on Trump's Instagram saying things like, "I voted for you, but what the hell is this?" As well as responses on Truth Social saying, "Bearded belly dancers, you dancing with someone other than your wife? This was weird for me and I love you, Trump. This should be deleted." With some even speculating, he didn't even post this himself. It must be someone meddling with his account. And while when the Washington Post asked questions about who produced it and how Trump obtained it, the White House declined to answer, but a spokeswoman did say, as President Trump has said, Gaza in its current state is uninhabitable for any human being. President Trump is a visionary, and his plan to have the United States involved in Gaza's rebuilding will allow for Palestinians to resettle in new, beautiful communities while improving conditions in the region for generations to come. Though there, you had the Post noting again that Trump has given mixed answers on whether or not Palestinians would be allowed to return to and live there after U.S. rebuilding. But yeah, that's the situation, and I'll pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts about the video in question and or our apparent memer-in-chief? But then, next up, we should talk about the sad fact that the United States just had its first death from measles since 2015. Right, and that because back in January, an outbreak was reported in West Texas, which is a rural part of the state, with officials reporting 124 cases across 9 counties as of Tuesday, up from 94 late last week. And that as there were another 9 cases reported so far in eastern New Mexico. And just for some context here, measles is not a fucking joke, right? It's airborne, extremely contagious, and in severe cases can cause blindness, pneumonia, brain swelling, or even death. And the current figures that we've seen in Texas are that around 18 people have been hospitalized, mostly kids from 5 to 17 years old. And now we have authorities confirming that the person who died was an unvaccinated school-age child at the Covenant Children's Hospital in the city of Lubbock. Now, in case it needs to be said, though, I think that I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine are both safe and effective according to scientific research, which is why it's required for all kids entering kindergarten kindergarten and public schools nationwide. But for those in homeschooling or private schools, especially religious ones, that rule doesn't apply. And it just so happens that West Texas is home to a close-knit Mennonite community. And what we're seeing is that in Gaines County, where the outbreak started, nearly 1 in 5 incoming kindergartners for the 2023-24 school year did not get the vaccine. And that is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services aims for a vaccination rate of 95%, saying that that's necessary to help prevent outbreaks of this highly contagious disease. So with that said, what we've seen so far is that most of the cases in Texas are in unvaccinated people, or at least people whose vaccination status is unknown, with only 5 cases reported in people who said they had the vaccine. But also, do not mistake this as a localized situation. This is a nationwide threat. Measles cases actually reached a nearly 3-decade high in 2019, and there were several outbreaks just last year, including one in Chicago that infected 60 people, none of which has been helped by the rise of the anti-vax movement in recent years. And so naturally with this, you had a reporter asking Trump and RFK Jr., our new health secretary, who said just last month that a panel would investigate the childhood vaccine schedule about the Texas outbreak and the reported death, with Trump then immediately passing the hot potato to RFK, who restated facts that are already known about the outbreak and then added,
"We're watching it. We put out a post on it yesterday, and we're going to continue to follow it."
And so obviously we're gonna have to wait to see what happens with this specific outbreak, but you have many concern now that this is kind of just a taste of something that is going to become much more common, especially depending on how RFK Jr. moves forward in his position. Time will tell, and I guess I'll just hope for the best. But then next up, the House just passed a massive budget bill that'll pave the way for major parts of Trump's agenda, but I've also been seeing things both accurately and inaccurately explaining what's actually in this, so we should dive into it. And so to start, this legislation passed with a very narrow margin of 217 to 215, with one Republican joining all Democrats voting against it. But notably, the whole thing almost went off the rails entirely after a revolt from the far right-wing faction of the party, which wanted more spending cuts, and more moderate members who were worried that the cuts went too far. In fact, we saw Republican leaders even cancel the vote at one point before changing course minutes later after Democrats had already left for the night, forcing them to rush back in. Ultimately, they pulled it off, and they took a crucial first step in a process known as budget reconciliation, which allows the Senate to bypass the 60-vote filibuster to pass the bill. Though notably the Senate's already passed a competing bill, so now both chambers will have to agree on a unified version. But as far as the contents of the budget bill, Mike Johnson's version, the idea here was to pass one enormous package that would allow Congress to pass much of Trump's legislative agenda, or what Trump keeps calling one big, beautiful bill. But a key thing is that in its current form, the legislation's not actually super specific. It's more of an overarching framework, a kind of blueprint. So for example, the proposal includes a general lump sum increase of $300 billion in unspecified funding for border security and defense programs. It would also increase the debt limit, which is the amount of money that the government's authorized to borrow to pay its bills, by $4 trillion. And arguably one of the biggest standouts is it would slash $2 trillion in federal spending over the next decade, in part to help pay for the $4.5 trillion in tax cuts that were also included in this package, with most of that $4.5 trillion going to finance an extension of tax cuts that Trump put in place during his first term that are set to expire this year. With it also being widely reported that Trump has asked Republicans to include new tax policies in whatever version of the bill they finalize. And that, including ending taxes on tips, Social Security benefits, and overtime wages, as well as increasing the cap on state and local tax deductions. And notably, while the extensions of those existing tax cuts will lower rates for almost all Americans, it's being reported that the wealthiest citizens stand to benefit the most. In fact, according to an analysis by the Center for American Progress, the majority of the tax cuts, nearly 60% or $2.5 trillion, that'll go to the top 10% of taxpayers earning more than $228,000 a year. So there, I think the next stat's even more wild, because a whopping 30% of the cuts, more than $1.24 trillion, that'll go to the top 1% of earners who make more than $743,000 annually. Or to put it another way, a way that I think is easier to understand or consume, is that the top 1% of earners will be seeing a tax cut averaging $62,000, which notably is higher than the annual family income for most of the 72 million Americans who have health insurance through Medicaid. And I bring up Medicaid because we've seen many Democrats accusing Republicans of plotting to pay for their tax cuts for the rich by cutting essential programs for low-income Americans like Medicaid and food stamps. So I will say, even some moderate Republicans have raised concerns about cuts to Medicaid and SNAP benefits, though of course they ultimately voted for the bill anyway. Though again, a big key thing here is that could also be because the House spending bill as is does not specify exactly what it'll slash from the federal budget as part of the $2 trillion in spending cuts. Instead, it just parses that total out among different House committees and directs them to figure out what to cut. And so with that, what we've seen is that the Energy and Commerce Committee, which notably oversees Medicaid and Medicare, being given the responsibility for the biggest cuts by far, with the spending bill as is directing the panel to come up with at least $880 billion to slash, which obviously is nearly half of the total $2 trillion savings that Republicans are requiring under this proposal. With that, that also being more than double what any other panel is being asked to cut. The second biggest request is at least $330 billion, which will be decided by the Education and Workforce Committee. Then after that, you have the Agriculture Committee, which oversees food stamps and is being asked to cut a minimum of $230 billion, and then another $562 billion in spending reductions. That's going out to a range of various different panels. Now, with all that said, I do want to note that Trump has previously said that he will not let Congress cut Medicare or Medicaid. And in fact, we saw him double down on that vow in a press conference today.
The spending bill that passed last night aims to cut $2 trillion.
Right.
Can you guarantee that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security will not be touched?
Yeah, I mean, I have said it so many times, you shouldn't be asking me that question. Okay? This will not be read my lips. It won't be read my lips anymore. We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud.
But with that, I'll say despite Trump's promises, it has been widely reported that Republicans are still eyeing cuts to Medicaid as well as food stamps. And this is it doesn't appear that Trump has made the same promises to protect food stamps, which notably help feed 1 in 8 Americans, which again has fed into the argument and narrative that the GOP is wanting to cut programs for low-income citizens to finance tax cuts for the wealthy. But also a big thing beyond all that is, regardless of Trump's assurances, experts have said that it's virtually mathematically impossible for the Energy and Commerce Committee to actually cut $880 billion without cutting either Medicare or Medicaid. Right? And that because those two programs make up the vast majority of the spending that the panel oversees. And according to the New York Times, even if the committee cuts everything that's not healthcare to $0, it'll still be more than $600 billion short. And this, as they reported, there's really not any wiggle room, saying if the committee can't save at least that much, the entire effort could be imperiled because Republicans passed this bill under the budget reconciliation process to avoid the Senate filibuster. And while other Republican leaders have also echoed Trump's comment about cutting alleged fraud from the public health insurance programs, it's unclear, 1, exactly how much that would save, 2, what they would deem fraud, and 3, would even any of that still be enough? Which is why right now you have people saying that it seems like just one of two things is going to play out. Either Republican lawmakers and the president are going to have to blatantly disregard the promises that Trump made to the public on Medicaid and Medicare, or go back to the drawing board entirely. Because if Republicans want to cut as much as $2 trillion as part of any budget bill, it's going to be hard to do without touching any of the 3 areas that Trump has vowed not to cut. Right? Because together, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid account for almost half of the total $6.75 trillion that the government spent in the last fiscal year. But this also, as it's unclear if Republicans could get enough support to pass a bill that doesn't include those cuts. Right? That $2 trillion figure, that was only added in the first place in a last-minute amendment to get support from the spending hawks in the party. And they'll likely insist on a similar figure to offset the new spending that they oppose, but that will be required for Trump's massive tax cuts as well as his border and defense priorities. And then we'll get to more news in just a moment, but first, let's be real. What's the first thing you notice about people? Right? And I'll tell you what it is for a lot of people. Their smile, and they notice the same about you. Smiles are actually crucial in social interactions, and oral care is key to your overall health. That's where today's sponsor, Guru Nanda, steps in. Right? Guru Nanda follows Ayurvedic principles using natural ingredients that are genuinely beneficial for your mouth. No harsh chemicals, no bleaching agents. And their dual chamber whitening mouthwash is alcohol and fluoride free, packed with hydrogen peroxide and natural essential oils that activate an oxyburst bubble reaction that whitens teeth and freshens breath. And Guru Nanda whitening strips are gentle on teeth, mixing hydrogen peroxide with coconut extracts, and their patented toothbrush has 8,000 plus ultra soft text bristles, perfect for sensitive gums. And finally, their famous coconut mint pulling oil is a natural teeth whitener, blending 7 essential oils like peppermint, clove, oregano, and tea tree with vitamins D3, E, and K2 supporting happy gums. I can't imagine getting a better deal for your oral care. For under $40, you're getting naturally, ethically sourced products that whiten without damaging your teeth. So do your mouth a favor and grab the Total Smile Makeover Kit today. Just scan the code on screen or head to gurunanda.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco for 15% off site-wide. Your coffee-stained teeth will thank you. But then, next up, we've got news about how kids these days are so glued to their screen that before they can even learn to walk, they learn to scroll. And 1, yes, I'm officially entering my grumpy old man era, and 2, that's not the point here. The point is that we got this new report from Common Sense Media, a group that surveys parents about their kids' media consumption, and it's very, very interesting. For example, it finding that 40% of children have their own tablet by age 2, and that grows to nearly 60% by age 4, with then 25% getting a personal cell phone by the age of 8. With one of the other interesting things being that the last time that they conducted this survey was right before the pandemic. So now, we can see how some of the numbers have changed over the past 5 years. But there, surprisingly, what they found is that for children aged 8 and younger, their average reported screen time is basically the same as it was back then, clocking in at around 2.5 hours per day. But one of the important things that has changed is the way that they're spending that time. With, traditional TV viewing declining while short-form algorithm-driven video platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts have been grabbed a greater share of kids' attention. And that's in addition to gaming, which young children now spend 65% more time doing than they used to. One of the ways that ends up being really consequential is the report notes that parents tend to have less oversight over that short-form content. And what I mean there is, for example, it found that over 60% of parents occasionally occasionally watch YouTube alongside their kids. But only 17% do the same with TikTok. And of course, we're getting this new information as seemingly there's been this endless stream of research over the past couple of decades showing the different effects screen time has on kids. With, for example, one study last year finding that preschool age kids logging 75 minutes or more of daily screen time displayed more anger and frustration as they grew older and had trouble regulating emotions. Which then, funny or tragic enough, that often led to parents giving their kids even more screen time, kind of like a digital pacifier, creating a vicious cycle. With us also seeing the Common Sense Media report finding that a quarter of parents use screens to help their child calm down when they're angry or upset. And then, another finding that repeatedly appears in the literature is that parts of the brain associated with reading, language, and decision making are weaker in kids who have more screen time. Though notably, and this was kind of a shock, there is a solid scientific consensus that kids who watch the PDS, they have bigger, stronger, and more powerful brains, and surprisingly even stronger bodies and possibly spirits. That is, at least to the data that I made up for that previous sentence, but the survey, it actually in reality also reported that about 1 in 5 kids use mobile devices for emotional regulation, meal times, or to fall asleep. And all of this is while the share of kids who read or are read to every day has increased 10 points for those 2 and younger, it has also decreased 10 points for those aged 5 to 8. And so with all of that, there might be some people going, if you're a parent or you're planning to become one someday, what options are you left with? Well, one of the possible answers that we've seen there comes from Jill Murphy, the chief content officer with Common Sense Media, who suggested be actively involved in what your little ones are watching, choose content you can enjoy together, and connect screen time to real world experiences like acting out stories or discussing characters' feelings. They're adding set clear boundaries around device use, establish tech-free times for meals and bedtime, and remember that media should be just one of many tools for nurturing your child's natural curiosity. Though this also is you have some experts saying you could just keep your kids away from screens altogether, at least during their early years. With one of the examples there being an expert telling the Today Show last month.
There's so many things we make kids wait to do in our society. We make them wait to drink beer, we make them wait to vote, we make them wait to have a gun. But for some reason, we're not doing the same thing with these very powerful devices that give access to all the contents related to all those things.
You think screen time is the new tobacco?
It's been compared to it, yeah. And actually, parents using cell phones with their kids has been compared to secondhand smoke.
And actually, on that last point, what he's saying is backed by science. Right? Some of the research out there suggests that kids get a lot of their screen time from simply role modeling their parents. With, for example, one study asking parents to rate their agreement with statements such as, when I am with my child, I use a screen-based device on a scale from 1, strongly disagree, to 4, strongly agree. And it found that for each point increase, their children's screen time shot up nearly 40 minutes. And so on that note, you had a professor of pediatrics telling CNN, our actions can speak so loudly that kids can't hear the words we are saying. Practicing what we preach makes all the difference. But of course, with all this, even if you can cut down on your own screen time, cutting down on your children's, it can be harder or easier depending on your circumstances. With there being another finding from the Common Sense Media report that kids from lower income households spend nearly twice as much time with screens as those from higher income households. And at least part of the reason may be that these devices take some of the burden of parenting off parents. With 2/3 telling the survey that they use screen media at least sometimes to occupy their child so they can get things done or take time for themselves. As well as 44% saying, they use it to occupy their child in public, such as at the doctor's office, grocery store, or restaurant. And so with all this, of course, while I'd love to know everyone's thoughts, I am going to specifically here ask the opinions of parents. And having pets, it does not count. You can call them fur babies, I don't care. Just don't realistically compare the two. But then, next up, despite weeks of Trump and Zelensky going after one another, it looks like the United States and Ukraine are about to make a resource deal. Maybe. Right? And we kind of touched on some of this last week, but the short version is that Trump claims that Ukraine owes well over $300 billion for aid that it's received and could work out a $500 billion deal for the country's rare minerals to help repay it. Now with that, notably it's been argued that those numbers are super inflated and official US government numbers put the amount under $200 billion. But either way, what we've seen is Ukraine won't recognize the aid as debt and says that doing so would open Pandora's box, and adding today, I will not accept even 10 cents of debt repayment in this deal, otherwise it will be a precedent. But notably, Zelensky was still willing to work out a deal with the hopes of getting some security guarantees from the US, with possibilities including US and European troops on the ground to protect the sites, or even NATO membership, although the US has rejected this idea. With Trump even saying today,
What concessions would you like to see?
Oh, I don't want to tell right now, but I can tell you that NATO you can forget about. I think that's probably the reason the whole thing started.
And instead, you have the US arguing that even having just American economic interests in the country, that's enough to deter any invasions. Now, with that in mind, the question is, well, what is this deal going to be? And honestly, no one is entirely sure of that right now. But what we do know is that yesterday, a draft of the deal was sent to Ukraine, and sometime within the next day, it's supposed to be signed by our Treasury Secretary, followed by his Ukrainian counterpart. And after that, President Zelensky is expected to meet with President Trump in the US to sign the agreement. And you had Trump saying,
I hear that he's coming on Friday. Certainly, it's okay with me. me if he'd like to, and he would like to sign it together with me, and I understand that's a big deal, very big deal.
Now, as for the actual details, it looks like the demands that Ukraine pay $500 billion to an American-backed fund were dropped. And so instead, Ukraine will reportedly give half of its future revenues from its natural resources to the fund, which is partially meant to rebuild Ukraine. With the US's interest in the fund said to be the maximum allowed by law, America will also commit to building up Ukraine in the future, and this also notably lacks Trump's demand that Ukraine pay back double for any future aid given. However, and this is a big however, there might be some wrinkles to all this. Ukraine has long demanded that security guarantees were required for any deal, and initial reports about this deal made it seem like those were dropped, with Trump just saying that Ukraine would have the right to fight on with the deal. But then, just as I was preparing this for you, Zelensky came out in a news conference and brought the issue back up, saying, without future security guarantees, we will not have a real ceasefire. And if we don't have it, nothing will work. Nothing will work. With him then going on to say that the deal right now is more of a framework. Now, that said, he does seem flexible about what those guarantees could be, saying it could involve countries other than the United States. But his main point is that a security guarantee is needed somewhere because Putin doesn't really want to end the war and Trump will have issues negotiating a peace. And so if Zelensky is going to sign over a bunch of Ukrainian resources, he wants to make sure that he'll have the guarantees that he feels will lead to a long-lasting peace. That said, it's also possible that as reporting is coming out, Trump's going to balk at the deal. Or Trump wants to be seen as a keen negotiator, but some experts don't think that the deal will actually add up to a lot of real-world impact. With, for example, ABC News pointing out that Ukrainian officials claim that the deal will only cover natural resources not currently used in Ukraine's budget. So you're talking about the possibility of oil, gas, or the majority of its minerals, which is also why we've seen former Swedish Prime Minister Carl Bildt saying that the minerals were a sideshow meant to keep Mr. Trump happy, and that, quote, it is not going to give a lot of money to the US, and I don't see it having any materially economic effect for many years. But for now, we'll have to watch this one step at a time and see, one, whether it happens, and two, what that looks like. But then, finally today, and good news meant to cleanse your news palette for the day, we're probably not going to get killed by an asteroid within a decade. But as you might recall, asteroid 2024 YR4 was originally found back in December by a telescope in Chile, with it estimated to be somewhere between 130 and 300 feet across. And last month, the International Asteroid Warning Network sent an alert to the astronomical community saying that this asteroid had a greater than 1% chance of hitting Earth in the next 7 years. And in the following weeks, that percentage just kept climbing and climbing. It was capped out on February 18th at just over 3% chance of hitting us in 2032, which notably is the highest probability NASA has ever recorded for an object of this size, a size that, again, it would wipe out a city if it made contact. And in fact, this asteroid managed to make it up to level 3 on the Torino Impact Hazard Scale, which is a tool used for categorizing potential collisions of space objects with Earth. Right? And so all of that made this the riskiest asteroid on record, and it caused it to go viral. Right? Everywhere online, someone was talking about the chances of this rock hitting Earth and what the impact, pun completely intended, would look like. But here's the thing, apparently, no worries, because now both NASA and the European Space Agency have given the all clear, with NASA now lowering the odds of this asteroid hitting us at 0.0017% and the ESA putting it at 0.001%. So roughly, a 1 in 59,000 chance of impact. So still more likely than you hitting the Powerball numbers, but really, really unlikely. With this, I do want to note that this shift wasn't entirely unexpected. In that, because you had Paul Chodas, director of NASA JPL Center for Near-Earth Object Studies, telling NPR earlier this month that we'd likely see the probability jump up and then fall back down as new observations were made. But those new observations reportedly were not easy to get. In that, because the asteroid has quickly been moving out of range of even the most powerful ground-based telescopes with its straight line trajectory, meaning that it'll be out of view by April and won't be viewable again until June of 2028. But I do also want to add, it feels like worth mentioning, while the odds for this space rock to hit Earth have dropped dramatically, there's still, right now at least, there's still a 1.7% chance that it could hit the moon. Though I want to stress there that experts say that that is also very likely to drop. But then, finally today, we have a congratulations, and let's talk about yesterday. Starting with congratulations to Evan B., SeatGeek's latest weekly winner, who scored $500 in tickets for a San Jose Sharks game. And for the rest of y'all, that's right, SeatGeek is still giving away $500 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. Or just imagine being the next winner and snagging $500 towards seeing your favorite artist, sporting event, or play. I mean, y'all, there's over 70,000 events to choose from. And all you gotta do is just add code PDS to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize, no purchase necessary. It's easy, it's a win-win, but that said, let's talk about yesterday in commentary. Right, and in those comments, there was a fair share of conversation around Fyre Fest 2, which there's just, I love the timing here. Marketecture saying, can't wait to use my SeatGeek prize to purchase Fyre Festival tickets. Meanwhile, you had others just saying, don't be stupid, saying anyone who buys a ticket to Fyre Festival 2 deserves to lose their money. Others just laughing and saying, I love the screenshot of the Fyre Festival 2 post where the first comment was simply, aren't you supposed to be in jail? And, I just gotta say, if there is a lesson to be learned from these stories is, you need to be more confident. I know so many smart and qualified people who, because they're smart and qualified, self-doubt exists in them because, you know, there's always more to learn. And then at the same time, you see all these grifters and hucksters and just business bullshitters, and like they sell it. If your competition out there is just gonna be lying or just believing the most insane shit, the least you could do is believe in yourself a little. You know, prop yourself up a little. I'm not saying say you're 6'7", but you know, stand on your tippy toes, metaphorically speaking. Also yesterday in those comments, separately, I'll say I appreciated some of the love. All right, Witchnock saying, I appreciate you, Phil, acknowledging that your viewer base just sometimes needs a break from motions vaguely at the world. Makes me wonder if you are remembering to sometimes find bits of joy in your day-to-day. And Tesseract saying, Phil, I couldn't listen to the news on a regular basis if it wasn't for you. You have been a light in the muck of sensationalized news coverage that plagues our TVs. Which were those two comments, I'll say a few things. The first being, I definitely do find bits of joy that is largely something I get from my children, which is also a part of, two, me trying to compartmentalize like news and the job and then just personal stuff. And again, like I said, that brings me to 3, which I mentioned yesterday. I think it is very important to be aware of the news, to activate where you can, because there is so much that it just feels like is out of our control. But then also making sure where you can, you make room for life and friends and family. And if you do not have certain things, obtaining that. So of course, all of it interacts. Part of the reason I care about the news and talking politics, even though fucking politics is miserable, is because it impacts everyone, not at the same level, right? It's the same storm, different boats. I constantly say you may not fuck with politics, but politics will fuck with you. But it'll also fuck with your kids, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, your friends, your neighbors. But also with all this, to bring it back to the Philip DeFranco show, what you're getting every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I am gonna try more and more, and we did it kind of, sort of today, to end on a lighter or human interest piece, or maybe even some good news if it's out there. Because I know the world weighs heavy and we the people are so over it. But that, my friends, you beautiful bastards, is where your Wednesday evening, Thursday morning dive into the news is gonna end. Of course, remember, I've got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific right here. And also, follow me on these socials. I'm putting out videos on breaking news here and there. But that said, thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.